They say betrayal never comes from your enemies. It always comes from the ones you trust the most. The ones you'd give your last piece of bread to. The ones you'd defend with your life. The ones you'd never question because you believe they'd never hurt you. Before we move forward, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. That's exactly what I believed about my best friend, Smith. Smith and I grew up together. We weren't just friends. We were brothers in every way except blood. From childhood games in the dusty streets, to sharing secrets about crushes in high school, to celebrating our first jobs together. We had a bond I thought was unbreakable. If anyone asked me who I trusted most in the world, I wouldn't even hesitate before saying his name. When life threw me curveballs, Smith was always there. When my father lost his job, he shared his lunch with me at school. When I couldn't afford textbooks, he gave me his old ones. When I felt broken after my first heartbreak, he stayed awake all night just to listen to me vent. For years, I thought of him not as a friend, but as family. And family I believed could never betray you, but the truth, the cruel truth? Sometimes it's the ones closest to you who hold the sharpest knives. The first time I saw cracks in our friendship, I brushed them aside. I told myself I was imagining things, overthinking, maybe being too sensitive. Because when you love someone like family, you don't want to see the ugly truth. You want to believe they'll never turn on you. But deep down, I should have paid attention. The little signs were always there, but I chose blindness over reality. Smith had a way of getting close to everyone I cared about. My family trusted him. My parents treated him like a second son. Even my younger sister looked up to him like an older brother. He was in every family picture, every holiday dinner, every milestone of my life. That's how close we were. But betrayal doesn't strike overnight. It builds slowly, like poison spreading through the veins. Looking back, I realized the seeds were planted long before I ever saw the first fruit. The offhand comments about my choices, the subtle competition in our achievements, the way he would downplay my successes while exaggerating his own. I thought it was harmless banter, but in truth it was envy, the silent killer of friendships. Still, I ignored it. I thought, this is my best friend. He would never hurt me. He would never cross that line. But life has a way of teaching you lessons the hard way, especially when you trust the wrong person. And the day came when Smith crossed the line in a way I could never forgive. I didn't know it then, but my best friend, the one I trusted with every secret, every dream, every fear, was preparing to stab me in the back so deeply that I would never be the same again. And when it happened, it shattered not just my faith in him, but my faith in friendship itself. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break you, it remakes you. It forces you to grow stronger, colder, sharper. It forces you to take control and rewrite the ending of your story. And that's exactly what I did, because when Smith betrayed me, I swore he would regret it. I swore he would feel the pain he inflicted on me. I swore that one day he would understand that betraying me was the worst mistake of his life. This is the story of how my best friend stabbed me in the back. But it's also the story of how I rose from that pain, stronger than ever, and delivered a revenge so sweet, so perfect, that it left him broken in ways he never expected. Before the darkness of betrayal swallowed everything, life with Smith felt like a brotherhood carved in stone. We had built our lives side by side, step by step, always believing the other would never let go. Growing up, we didn't have much. Both of our families struggled to make ends meet, and there were days when survival itself felt like a battle. But through those storms, Smith and I always leaned on each other. We shared food, laughter, and dreams, and we built an unspoken promise that no matter how hard life got, we'd always stand together. When I landed my very first job at a small electronics shop, Smith was the first one I told. His smile lit up brighter than mine, and he clapped me on the back as if he himself had won the job. "We're going to make it, brother," he said, "together." That word, together, meant everything back then, and it wasn't just words. He showed up for me in ways no one else ever did. There was a time I fell seriously ill, the kind of sickness that leaves you bedridden and helpless. My own relatives visited once or twice, but Smith, he was there every single day, bringing me food, helping me sit up, even cracking jokes to keep my spirits alive. He took care of me as though it was his responsibility. That's the kind of loyalty I thought he had in his heart, and I wasn't blind to his needs either. When Smith's mother passed away, it broke him in ways I can't even put into words. He was shattered, a man lost without direction. I stayed by his side, helping him get through sleepless nights, even pooling my savings to help him pay for funeral costs. I did it because he was my best friend, my brother, and I believed true friendship meant sacrifice. We dreamed together too. We'd sit on the rooftop of my house under the stars and talk about the future. He wanted to start a business, I wanted to own a home, and we promised we'd help each other reach those goals. The bond we had wasn't just about surviving the present. It was about building a future side by side. My parents loved him like their own son. My father would often say, "You're lucky to have a friend like Smith. Real friends are rare." My younger sister would always invite him to her school events, and he never missed a single one. Even the neighbors knew us as a pair. You couldn't mention my name without his following right after. We were inseparable, two halves of the same coin, and I believed in him so completely, so blindly, that I would have trusted him with my life. In fact, I did. One time, I was saving money to buy my first motorcycle. It wasn't much, but for me it was a big dream. Smith knew about it, and when I had to travel for a week, I handed him the envelope of cash I had saved and said, "Keep this safe for me." I didn't even think twice. Who else could I trust more than him? And true to his word, he returned it untouched when I got back. That moment, I felt a surge of pride. This is what real friendship looks like. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. All the signs of his hidden envy, his subtle comparisons, his occasional digs at my progress, I brushed them off as harmless. I chose to see him as the brother who'd always had my back, and maybe that's what made the betrayal so devastating. It wasn't just about what he did, it was about everything he destroyed. The sacrifices, the loyalty, the love of two families intertwined. It all came crashing down when Smith revealed who he truly was. But back then, before betrayal poisoned everything, I saw him as the most loyal man I knew. I believed in him completely, and I would have given my life for him. What I didn't know was that Smith was quietly sharpening his knife in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Betrayal never comes all at once. It creeps in slowly, like a shadow stretching longer as the sun sets. With Smith, the signs were there long before I ever realized. But when you love and trust someone like a brother, your heart blinds you to the truth your eyes can clearly see. The first cracks began with whispers, rumors I refused to believe. A mutual friend once pulled me aside and said, "Be careful, man. Smith doesn't always speak highly of you when you're not around." I laughed it off. Smith, my best friend? No way. I convinced myself they were just jealous of our bond, trying to create division where none existed. But soon, I started noticing little things myself. Times when I'd share my achievements, like when I finally got a promotion at work, and Smith's smile never quite reached his eyes. He'd clap my back, say congrats, but then add something that stung. "Well, you finally caught up to me," or "Don't let it get to your head." At first, I brushed it off as playful banter. But over time, those comments piled up like stones on my chest. Then there was the money. Smith had always been bad with finances, and I often lent him small amounts whenever he needed. But one day, I overheard him telling someone, "I don't need to worry. If I'm ever broke, he'll always cover for me. That's what he's there for." It hit me harder than I expected. Was I just a safety net for him? Was our friendship built on loyalty or convenience? Things grew stranger when I noticed how much attention Smith started giving to people around me, especially my family. Of course, he had always been close to them, but this time it felt different. He spent more time with my sister than with me, asking her about her studies, helping her with assignments, even showing up to events without me. My mother once mentioned, "Smith is such a thoughtful boy. He even fixed the sink for us when you weren't home." I wanted to be happy he was helping, but a gnawing feeling grew in my chest. Why did it feel like he was slowly slipping into my place, into my family, as though he wanted to replace me? The turning point came when I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. I walked into a small gathering late, and just before I entered the room, I heard Smith's voice. "Yeah, he's too trusting. He doesn't even realize half the things going on around him. Sometimes I wonder how he's even gotten this far. Without me, he'd probably still be struggling." My heart froze. My best friend, the one I had defended countless times, was belittling me behind my back. I didn't confront him that night. I just stood there in silence, swallowing the bitterness like poison. After that, I started noticing more. The way he'd subtly take credit for things I had done when talking to others. The way he twisted stories so he always came out looking like the hero. The way he made me feel small in moments when I should have felt proud. It wasn't just words, it was actions too. Once I introduced Smith to some of my colleagues at work. Before I knew it, he was networking with them, attending events I wasn't invited to, and even using my name to gain trust. I told myself it was fine, that friends help each other climb. But deep down, I knew he was climbing on my back, and yet I couldn't let go. I kept giving him the benefit of the doubt, because that's what you do when you see someone as family. You excuse their flaws, you justify their mistakes, you forgive what shouldn't be forgiven. But betrayal doesn't stop when you forgive it. It grows bolder. It sharpens its teeth, and Smith was only getting started. The rumors, the envy, the subtle digs, they were just the warm-up. I didn't know it yet, but the real betrayal, the knife in the back moment that would tear my world apart, was waiting just around the corner, and when it came, it would destroy everything I thought I knew about loyalty, friendship, and trust. If the whispers and cracks in trust were storms on the horizon, then the day of betrayal was the lightning strike that split my world in two. It started with an opportunity, a business deal I'd been working toward for months. A local investor was interested in partnering with me on a small electronics shop expansion. For me, it was a dream come true. Finally, I had a chance to step out of survival mode and build something lasting. Naturally, I shared the news with Smith. Why wouldn't I? He was my best friend, my brother. We sat together at my kitchen table, going over my ideas. He nodded along, asked questions, even gave suggestions. "Man, this is big," he said, smiling wide. "I'm proud of you." His words warmed me. I thought he truly meant them. What I didn't know was that behind that smile was a plan, a knife sharpening in the shadows. A week later, I walked into the investor's office, full of hope. But the moment I sat down, I sensed something was wrong. The man's tone was cold, his eyes distant. "I appreciate you coming," he said, "but I've already been approached with a more refined proposal. Someone else pitched me the same idea with better details." Confused, I asked, "Who?" He leaned back and spoke the name that shattered me. "Smith!" The room spun. For a second, I thought I misheard. My best friend? The one I had trusted with my dreams, my plans, my future, had stolen them and presented them as his own. I walked out of that office numb, my heart pounding with disbelief. I called him immediately. He didn't answer. Hours later, I found him at a cafe, sitting across from the same investor, laughing, shaking hands. My hands trembled as I approached. "Smith," I said, my voice breaking, "what are you doing?" He didn't flinch. He didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said words that cut deeper than any blade. "Business is business. You were too slow, too trusting. I just saw an opportunity and took it. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. The betrayal hit me like a dagger to the chest. This wasn't some stranger. This wasn't competition. This was my best friend, the man I had fed, supported, defended, and trusted with my life. He had stolen my dream and acted like it was nothing, and it didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, I discovered the full extent of his betrayal. He hadn't just stolen my idea. He had been preparing for months, using my connections, my research, even my contacts. He had played me like a fool, smiling to my face while plotting behind my back. But the most painful part wasn't losing the deal, it was losing him. realizing that the brother I thought I had, the bond I had cherished, was nothing more than a mask. A mask worn by a man who valued greed over loyalty, envy over love, betrayal over brotherhood. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying every moment of our friendship. Every laugh, every sacrifice, every promise. And now, all I could see was the smirk on his face as he told me not to take it personally. The rage inside me was unbearable. The pain twisted into something darker. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My family noticed, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. How could I explain that the man they loved like a son had betrayed me so completely? But as the days passed, my pain hardened into resolve. Betrayal had destroyed me, but it had also remade me. I realized one thing: Smith thought he had won. He thought I was weak, broken, finished. But he was wrong, because while he celebrated his stolen victory, I was already planning the revenge that would make him regret the day he ever crossed me. And when it came, it would be sweet, so sweet that he would remember it for the rest of his life. The night after I discovered Smith's betrayal, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. It wasn't just the business deal I had lost. It was something far bigger. It was the trust, the brotherhood, the years of loyalty I had invested in him. It was the sense that I had a partner in life, someone who always had my back. Now all of that lay in ruins. I felt hollow. My chest ached like something had been carved out of me. My mind replayed everything: the late-night talks on the rooftop, the promises of sticking together, the sacrifices I made for him. They all felt like lies now, like scenes from a movie where the ending had already been decided. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I had been too trusting. Maybe I should have seen the signs earlier. Maybe I had been a fool for believing in brotherhood in a world ruled by greed. The guilt gnawed at me, whispering that I had handed him the knife he used to stab me. But guilt soon gave way to anger, and anger gave way to something even darker, a hunger for justice. I remember looking into the mirror that night. My eyes were bloodshot, my face pale, but behind the pain there was something new: fire. A fire I had never seen in myself before. The betrayal had broken me, but in that brokenness I found clarity. I realized something important. People like Smith thrive because they think no one will stand up to them. They think loyalty makes you weak. They think kindness makes you blind. And they believe betrayal comes without consequences, but not this time. Not with me. I couldn't let him walk away with my dreams, my dignity, my trust. If I stayed silent, if I let this go, I would be betraying myself. And worse, I would be teaching people like him that they could get away with it. As the days passed, I withdrew from everyone. My parents thought I was grieving over a lost opportunity, but the truth was darker. I was grieving over a lost brother. I avoided Smith completely, but I watched him from afar. His business deal started taking shape. He walked around the neighborhood with his new confidence, flashing smiles, shaking hands, boasting about his vision. Every time I saw him, my blood boiled. Not just because he had betrayed me, but because he carried himself like he was untouchable. Like I was nothing more than a stepping stone he had crushed on his way up. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to beg for what was mine. I wasn't going to cry in silence while he thrived on stolen dreams. No, if he thought betrayal had no price, then I would show him just how high that price could be. But here's the thing. Revenge isn't something you rush. It's not about screaming or fighting in the heat of the moment. True revenge is patient, calculated, and devastating. It's about waiting for the perfect time to strike, the moment when your enemy feels the safest. That's when the fall hurts the most. So I started planning, quietly, carefully. I replayed every conversation we had, every detail he had stolen from me, every weakness he had ever confessed. I knew him better than anyone else. And that was my advantage, because if Smith had used my trust as a weapon against me, I was going to use my knowledge of him as a weapon against him. And while he walked around celebrating his so-called victory, I was building the storm that would bring his entire world crashing down. The pain he gave me was fuel. The betrayal was fire, and my revenge would be the sweetest thing he would never see coming. When anger is raw, it burns bright and leaves only ashes. But when anger is tempered with patience and sharpened into strategy, it becomes something else entirely: dangerous, precise, and unstoppable. After the betrayal, I refused to let fury make me reckless. If I was going to take him down, I would do it in a way that left no room for regret. I would make sure every move counted. First, I swallowed my pride and mapped everything I knew about Smith. I listed his strengths, his weaknesses, his habits, his vanities. I replayed every conversation we'd had about his dreams, the little boasts he made when he thought no one was listening, the secrets he let slip after a drink or two. You don't plan revenge by guessing, you plan it with facts. And I had years of facts. Smith loved appearances. He cultivated an image, confident, successful, untouchable. He wanted people to believe he'd earned everything. So my first rule became clear: hit where his image mattered most. Make people see the truth. Make his balloon a bragging pop in front of those who'd helped him climb. Next, I identified allies. I couldn't and wouldn't do this alone, but not in the way you might think. I didn't want a gang or a mob. I needed a few quiet, reliable people who could confirm facts, remember exact words, and hold on to evidence. Old co-workers, a mutual acquaintance who'd grown tired of Smith's ego, and one of the investor's assistants who had shown curiosity about how Smith got his proposal. Small, discreet, practical people. I approached them with calm, not begging for help, but offering truth to those who deserved it. Then came evidence. I started collecting it the only way I knew how, methodically. Emails, messages, times and dates, witnesses. Smith had been sloppy in places where he thought I wasn't watching. He'd forwarded my drafts without changing the timestamps, used my phrases in emails, and once, boasting about a vision he'd copied from our rooftop plans. I saved screenshots, recorded dates, and wrote down who was present at conversations. The more mundane the detail, the better. Small things make large lies unravel. Financial records were the next target. If his business was built on stolen groundwork, the trail would show. I quietly asked for help from someone at the investor's office, a person who still had a soft spot for fairness. I wasn't blackmailing or threatening. I was asking for transparency. If there were contracts or drafts that mentioned my name, they needed to be found. People hate being lied to more than they hate losing money. The investor had a reputation to protect, and once he knew the truth, he would care. I also planned psychologically. Revenge is as much about breaking the mind as it is about exposing the deed. Smith needed to believe he was untouchable until the moment the ground gave way. So I staged small, controlled reveals to people close to him. A casual comment here, a photo reposted there, a question that planted doubt. Nothing overt, just enough to make him reposition, to make him wonder if someone else knew. Anxiety is a quiet weapon. It makes people sloppy, and they reveal more than they intend. Timing mattered more than anything. Strike too soon, and people write it off as spite. Wait too long and suspicion dies, or the target becomes immune. I watched his calendar, noted when he had investor dinners, family events, and community appearances. The plan had to hit when he felt most secure, a public moment where his image would crack loudest. I rehearsed my moves in my head as if I were playing chess. Each piece had its place. If he countered one move, I had two more ready. I never acted in anger. Every contact I made, every document I collected, every conversation I initiated was done with a cold, clinical clarity. This was not about humiliation for humiliation's sake. It was about justice. If I could expose what he had done and reclaim what was mine, dignity, reputation, and the lesson, then I would have won. There was another vital element: restraint. I kept my face calm, my voice friendly in public, and my messages unreadable. Smith still smiled when we crossed paths, still assumed I was defeated. I let him. Letting him feel secure was as much a part of the plan as the evidence and the witnesses. The shock would be far more effective if it came from someone he considered harmless. The last piece was personal. Revenge without purpose is hollow. Mine had to be clean and final. I did not want to ruin him beyond repair. I wanted him to understand the cost of his betrayal. I wanted him to lose the facade, to stand exposed, and to know that the brother he discarded had taken his life back. So I set deadlines, compiled my proof, and scheduled my moves. Quiet calls, gentle nudges, arranged meetings where the right people would be present. I rehearsed my words, not to hurt, but to reveal. When the time came, I would present the truth like a knife wrapped in velvet, calm, undeniable, and precise. Planning revenge taught me something unexpected, the power of patience. Where once I had thought action meant screaming and scenes, I learned that silence could be louder. Waiting didn't make me weaker. It made me smarter. Each day I waited, Smith grew more comfortable in his lie. Each day I waited, I gathered one more piece of proof. And when the plan finally unfolded, he would not only lose his stolen deal, he would lose the one thing he cared about most: how the world saw him. That would be the true retribution, because in the end, revenge isn't about being cruel. It's about restoring balance, and I intended to restore it with surgical precision. The plan was in motion. Months of quiet watching, collecting proof, and lining up allies finally came down to a single day. The one I'd marked on my mental calendar and rehearsed in my head until I knew every beat like a heartbeat. Execution wasn't about rage. It was about timing, theater, and the slow crushing of a lie that had been built on my back. I chose the Investors' Gala, a polished evening where deals were whispered over glasses of wine and reputations were polished. In front of the city's important faces, Smith loved nights like that. He thrived under the lights, wearing confidence like armor. If his image was going to crack, it would have to happen where everyone who mattered could see it. I arrived early, calm and composed, buttoning my jacket like a man with nothing to hide. In truth, my pockets were heavy with evidence, printed emails with timestamps, screenshots of messages where Smith casually borrowed my language, financial notes that linked his pitch to the work I'd handed him months earlier. But documents alone don't break a man's story. What breaks a lie is witness and context, people who can speak to the truth with memory and detail. That's where my allies came in. One by one, they slipped into the room. The investor's assistant who had always been uneasy about Smith's sudden competence, an old colleague who'd noticed Smith's habit of using other people's ideas as his own, and the neighbor who had watched Smith grow closer to my family in suspicious ways. They were quiet, discreet, and ready. No theatrics, only facts delivered calmly, unassailably. Smith arrived late, radiant and smug. He moved through the crowd, collecting praise and nods, his smile broad, the sort that expects only victory. He had no idea that the current he trusted under his feet was about to be pulled away. I didn't confront him at once. Instead, I waited until the right moment, when the investor called for a brief speech. People gathered closer, the room hushed, and Smith straightened, ready for applause. I felt my palms steady. This was not about personal retribution on a street corner. It was about exposing the truth where his new life depended on it. I stepped forward and asked for a moment. The room murmured. Eyes turned. Smith's smirk flickered. He thought I was there to beg or to throw a scene. He didn't know that the moment he heard my voice, the room would start seeing him as he truly was. I spoke slowly, measured, and without venom. I told the story, not as a rant, but as a timeline. I outlined the nights we planned, the rooftop conversations, the files I'd shown him, and then I produced the emails with dates. I handed the investor a printed draft of my original proposal, and then another, with Smith's cover letter, stamped with timestamps he couldn't explain. The assistant corroborated what I said. She described the odd forwards and the times Smith had asked her to clarify dates. The colleague explained the phrases Smith had lifted word for word. The neighbor confirmed that Smith had been positioning himself with my contacts long before his proposal appeared. People listened. The investor's face tightened. Smith tried to laugh it off, to charm his way out. But charm doesn't survive when concrete proof sits on a polished table and witnesses speak one after another. He sputtered excuses. I improved on the idea. I put in the work. Business is competitive, but none of that mattered against the trail of timestamps and corroborated testimony. Then I did something he didn't expect. I played him the voice note from a night he boasted to a mutual friend about taking what was mine because he was too soft. It was mundane in tone, but devastating in content. There was Smith's voice, smug and unrepentant, and the room heard it. The sound of his own words cut through every excuse. It wasn't a dramatic shouting match. It was surgical. People felt the betrayal in the plain facts. The investor excused himself, then came back with an apology that felt colder than pity. He informed Smith that the proposed deal was no longer viable. The trust that underpinned it was gone. Contracts were paused. Conversations were halted. In the space of minutes, Smith's new world went from celebration to suspicion, but the exposure didn't stop with boardroom consequences. One of the witnesses had already prepared a concise, factual post to the Community Business Forum, proof, links, the timeline, and within an hour, the post had spread. People began asking questions. Colleagues who'd once admired Smith now recalled little inconsistencies. Clients reconsidered meetings. The appearances he'd relied on were beginning to fray. I watched him as it all collapsed, not with gloating, but with a strange, quiet satisfaction. He slumped, the confident posture gone. He looked around, searching for allies, for some handhold to salvage his image, but the room had shifted. His charm counted for less than the sum of facts that now stood between him and his false narrative. Afterward, when the crowd thinned, he tried to corner me in a stairwell. "You think this is over?" He hissed, rage boiling under hurt. "You think exposing me will fix what you lost?" I looked at him steady. "It fixes more than what I lost," I said. "It fixes the truth." He lunged with words, then left, humiliated and exposed, his mask gone. Revenge had never been about ruining him until he suffered. It was about restoring balance. That night, the investor withdrew his public praise. Smith's phone messages went unanswered by those who once queued to help him. He had to explain himself to people who once trusted him without question, parents, partners, business contacts. The humiliation was public and precise, the consequence of a man who had believed himself immune. As I walked away from the gala, the air tasted different. The victory wasn't a celebration. It was a reclaiming of dignity, respect, and the right to be heard. Smith would recover, perhaps, but not without the knowledge that betrayal carries a tax. The trap had been set, and it had closed exactly where I intended. The sweetest part, watching him realize that the brother he discarded was the one who would stand in the light and make the truth impossible to ignore. The night of the gala was the turning point, but the aftermath, oh, that was where the true weight of revenge revealed itself. Exposing Smith in front of investors, colleagues, and allies was one thing, but watching how the ripples spread afterward was something else entirely. It was like tossing a stone into a calm pond. The waves carried further than I ever imagined. The morning after, the business forum post that my ally had uploaded the night before exploded. Screenshots of the emails, the copied drafts, and the damning voice note spread through every professional circle we both had ever touched. By noon, Smith's name wasn't trending for success anymore. It was trending for betrayal. People don't rally behind frauds. They dissect them, mock them, and warn others to stay away. Calls stopped coming. Meetings were cancelled. Even people who had once blindly defended him pulled back to protect their own reputations. It wasn't rage or dramatic confrontations. It was the silent withdrawal of trust. And in business, silence is death. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Smith spent the entire day trying to control the fire. He called investors, sent long defensive emails, tried to spin the story as jealousy or miscommunication. But you can't unring a bell. Once people hear proof, excuses sound desperate. His charm, the very thing he thought could save him, became the rope that strangled him, because now every word felt manipulative. And then came the personal fallout. His parents, who had proudly introduced him as their brilliant son building an empire, suddenly stopped boasting. They had to face neighbors whispering that their golden boy was a fraud. His girlfriend, who had adored the image of success, walked away within the week. "If you lied about this," she reportedly told him, "what else have you lied about?" Betrayal doesn't stay in one box. It leaks into every corner of life. Meanwhile, I remained quiet. I didn't need to gloat or rub salt in his wounds. The beauty of well-executed revenge is that it speaks for itself. Every consequence he faced was not because I screamed louder, but because I let the truth do the screaming for me. I went about my days as if nothing had happened, but I carried myself differently, not as a victim, but as someone who had reclaimed his dignity. Smith, on the other hand, began to unravel. The confident, sharp-dressed man who used to strut into rooms now avoided them. He became paranoid, glancing over his shoulder, wondering if another piece of evidence might appear, if someone else might come forward with more stories. And people did. Once the dam broke, others started sharing small incidents, times he'd taken credit for ideas in meetings, moments where he'd exaggerated his role in projects. The image of successful entrepreneur crumbled into that of a serial opportunist. I heard whispers that he was drinking more, showing up late, his once polished smile replaced by clenched teeth and dark circles. His downfall wasn't sudden like a cliff. It was slow erosion, piece by piece, until the structure he'd built on my stolen foundation collapsed under its own weight. The sweetest part of it all wasn't his misery. It was the justice, watching the balance restore itself. For months, I had carried the pain of betrayal, wondering if truth ever mattered in a world where charm and lies seemed to win. But seeing the community, the investors, the colleagues all turn their backs on him because they finally saw the truth. That was the justice I had been waiting for, and yet, deep inside, I also felt a strange calmness. I didn't want him destroyed beyond repair. I didn't want to become the same kind of man he was. I wanted him to live with the lesson, to know that betrayal carries consequences that money, lies, or charisma cannot erase. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he had done every time he looked into a mirror. That is exactly what happened. Smith wasn't destitute, but he was diminished. He had to start over from scratch, but this time without the trust, without the easy praise, without the support he had stolen. His name had become a warning, not an inspiration. And that, more than anything, was the revenge I wanted, not his destruction, but his exposure, because betrayal may break you in the moment, but when you rise, when you expose the liar for who they are, the world shifts. And in that shift, you realize revenge isn't always about watching someone burn. Sometimes it's about making sure they never again shine with a light that doesn't belong to them. And that's exactly what Smith had lost, the stolen shine. Looking back, the betrayal by Smith was one of the hardest lessons of my life. It wasn't just the stolen business opportunity or the lies he told. It was the realization that someone I trusted with my deepest secrets could turn against me without a second thought. That kind of pain leaves scars, but it also leaves wisdom. I learned something important. True loyalty isn't given, it's earned. And trust, once broken, is a mirror that never truly repairs itself. But I also learned that betrayal doesn't have to define you. Pain doesn't have to paralyze you. In fact, it can be the catalyst for transformation, for strategy, for reclaiming what's rightfully yours. Revenge, when planned carefully, isn't about cruelty. It's about restoring balance. It's about exposing the truth and ensuring that those who betray understand the consequences of their actions. And in that process, you discover your own strength, your own resilience, and your ability to rise above treachery stronger than before. Smith's downfall wasn't immediate, and it wasn't loud. It was precise, methodical, and undeniable. The truth reached everyone who mattered, and his false image crumbled. Watching him face the consequences of his actions, knowing that justice had been restored without me losing my integrity, that was the sweetest part of all. But this story isn't just about revenge or betrayal. It's about recognizing the people in your life who genuinely care and those who wear masks of friendship for their own benefit. Life will teach you hard lessons, but how you respond, with patience, strategy, and strength, is what truly defines you. If you've ever been betrayed, or if you've ever felt the sting of trust broken, remember this: you are stronger than you think. And sometimes the best revenge isn't just paying someone back. It's reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace of mind. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, if it inspired you to think about loyalty, trust, and standing up for yourself, then make sure to like this video, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to my channel, Revenge Depth. By subscribing, you join a community that explores the raw, emotional and real stories of betrayal, revenge, and life lessons that many are too afraid to share. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Because at Revenge Depth, we reveal the truths people try to hide and the lessons they teach us about life. Trust and strength. Remember, betrayal may break you, but it can also make you unstoppable. Stay vigilant, stay strong, and never let anyone take what's yours without consequences. This is Revenge Depth, and this is just the beginning of the stories you need to hear.